I may be the tiniest bit obsessed with this show. It's Romania Black. And yes, I may be the tiniest bit obsessed with Monster. Just a wee bit, because I use the excuse that I'm going on break and that I won't be able to use my internet to upload these larger files onto Vidyard. But the truth is I kind of just want to watch ahead. But I'm also using the excuse that I'm trying to curb spoilers. And I know this is a very long series that I'm going to be watching all of 2023 every Friday. And so I'm like trying to stay ahead of spoilers and not be spoiled. So because of that, I'm going to watch ahead. And I'm not going to tell you how far ahead. I'm just going to go at my own pace, right? But if I get any comments that I do think are worth mentioning, I will definitely bring them up on this channel and in these videos. But I just got to. I'm addicted. I'm really addicted. And the last episode, episode 9, was just so... It was so understated. I still feel like I go back and rewatch that episode. It's such a soft episode, which it feels like the calm before the storm, right? It feels like we slowly build up Tenma, and it's the funniest thing in the weirdest of ways, because it's this calm, almost serene episode, and it like takes a second, like we've been just going boom, boom, boom the last several episodes, and we take this one to like chill. But as we're chilling, Tenma's learning how to use a gun. So it's like, what is even happening? Like, it's a soft moment with a mercenary teaching Tenma to use a gun to potentially go kill Johan. And there's this girl that was orphaned, and it's like the circumstances are anything but soft. And this show treats them like they're just the calm. This is the calm is what I'm saying. And so it's kind of, I was thinking about today, I was like, if this is the calm before the storm, episode 9, what are we about to get into? Because we're about to be like, we're not even a seventh. We're almost a seventh of the way through the series, which is crazy. But yeah, so I don't know what to expect. I don't know. At this point, he's headed to Verdun to go investigate where there's been a couple murdered. Longe's on the trail. Longe's like a few steps behind. He just keeps getting short, right? The rain washes away the evidence. And he gets close, but he's not close enough. He's just now catching up to where Tenma's been, and he's already a few steps ahead. And Hugo wouldn't tell Longe where he was going. So that's going to delay Longe. I feel it's going to delay Longe just enough that he's going to show up right after something drastic happens. We don't know what's happened to Nina. We assume Johan or his associates are in Verdun and they've caused the murder. We don't know exactly. Word has spread and everyone thinks that Tenma is the one that's been killing these people. But how did that word spread? Is Eva playing a part in spreading the word? How does that work? We just don't know. We just don't know. So there's a lot of questions going into this episode of what to expect, and I don't have any expectations, which is kind of why I wanted to start this. I don't want to know, because I've been trying to avoid those comments on YouTube that they're like, just wait. And I'm like, I don't want you to tell me that. So I've been avoiding those comments as much as I can by watching a little bit ahead. So that's where we're at. So I'm excited to start this episode and see what all we get. So we're going to see, right? But let's not waste any more time, shall we? We are going to start episode 10 of Monster. It feels like we just started this series and we're already 10 episodes in. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, calm before the storm, right? Oh my gosh! There was a lot happen in this episode. A lot. And at the halfway point, I was like, we're only halfway through. What? So we just got handed to us. The mangaka just said, here is a bunch of characters. Here you go. It's like, what? Oh my God. Crazy talk, right? Absolute crazy talk. The thing about this series that's interesting is that it kind of skips around, right? There are little gaps of time that the mangaka does not feel like you need to know every little step of the way. Like you can pitter patter a few steps and not know about it, right? So like in the last episode, we don't really get confirmation of how Tenma stumbled upon Hugo. Now, in the manga that may be, I don't want to know manga spoilers because I am planning on reading the manga in my own time as I go through the series. So I don't want to know about it yet. I've ordered the first volume of the manga, and it's on its way. I don't know exactly where the first volume cuts off at, but I've ordered it. I found it online and was like, no, I'm going to go ahead and get it in English because I've heard they're hard to find. So I was like, nope, going to order it and go ahead and get it, and then slowly build my collection. But I was like, okay, so we get little gaps of time. Like, we don't know exactly how Tenma found Hugo, but we know he found him. And we as the audience, I like that this show doesn't treat us like we're dumb. The show treats us like we are smart enough to fill in the gaps. We don't need to know every little thing. So we find out, we have Tenma goes and finds Hugo. We don't exactly see him, research and find him out, but we just get to that point where he finds him. We get to the point we need to get to. And in this episode, we don't exactly see how Tenma gets from the bus where he's hitchhiking from to the mansion of the couple that was killed, but we just know that he gets there. So I like that the mangaka doesn't feel like we need to follow every little step of the way, but the important parts, the mangaka treats it like, yeah, we should know that. So a lot happens in this episode. A lot. Some creepy shit goes down. I was waiting for that guy. That guy was so calm and scarily so that I was waiting for him to put the gun in his mouth. I was waiting for him to just do it that way, not through the side of the head, but I was waiting for him to put the gun in his mouth like the whole time. I was like, nope, he was waiting until Tenma got there to shoot himself. And there's lots of implications with what's going on, and it's a bit creepy. And so I'm so fascinated by this episode because there's so much going on. We get to meet Heckle. Heckle, again, the mangaka loves to create these side characters that are just fascinating, right? That are just fascinating. And someone in the comments was talking about how the mangaka has said in interviews that they really like writing side characters and like exploring them, making them really layered. And I was like, yeah, because normally you have, rounded characters that are very complex and have personalities and everything, kind of like Tenma. But then you have flat characters that are just kind of off in the background. They don't really have, they're very two-dimensional. They don't have a lot to them. But this mangaka and this creator is kind of like, no, what if our flat characters weren't flat? What if they actually had lots of layers and were complicated and interesting? And I'm like, I'm all about it. I'm here for it. So we have a lot going on in this episode, and I was like, where do we even start? Because there's a lot happening. And my dog this whole time, I was trying to keep them at bay because they were like, they kept bringing their toy up being like, you need to throw it. And I was like, how about we don't? But they finally, Huck has learned that once the sound comes on the computer, he's like, okay, fine. So we go to the Jaeger house. Yep. Where he orders the Manhattan. And I love, again, I do like a Manhattan. Manhattan's a good time. But I love that he's like, where's my red cherry? And he's like, huh? And he's like, there should be red cherry in it, or it's not a Manhattan. You do it right. If you're going to give me something, I want it to be exactly how it's supposed to be. So let's talk about Heckle. Heckle's an interesting character. And we get like him being set up here. The Heckle, he is a thief. He's a thief. And he likes things as they should be. In a broad sense of the word. He's like, if you give me a Manhattan, it better be a Manhattan. If I'm a thief, I better get some rewards out of it, right? He's like, if I'm going to steal something, I better get something out of it. He's very much like, what I'm doing the job for, I better get my reward, right? But as we can see, he's not afraid to like get himself into debt. But yeah, so, and the bartender's like, okay, yeah, sorry about that. It's like, you should be. And so then he takes the cherry. And I like that it says something about his character. Like he instantly drinks the Manhattan, like gobbles it down. But it says something about his character that he doesn't waste things. He very much does not waste, and uses his resources. He's not afraid to make a quick buck, not afraid to use the resources around him, because he keeps that little cherry stem toothpick like the entire time. He says, my business goes well when I have this in my mouth. So he has rituals, right? He has certain rituals. He's like Madorova off Kroko's basketball. That's what immediately I was thinking of. He is very like kind of superstitious. Maybe not superstitious is the right word, but has like a ritual and a routine. He's like, I have my routine. I do things a certain way and things go fine when I follow the routine. When I don't, things don't go fine. And so having the cherry in his mouth, and he leaves a note and he's like, what? He's like, it's a jinx. A jinx. I like, what the heck, Herschel? Okay. He's framed at a very odd angle at the opening of the episode where his head looks really large. And I'm guessing that's just how the manga portrays him. But his head doesn't look nearly that big once we actually see Timma with him. But when his head was that big, he reminded me of the little person that's in the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks. That and Hoggle from Labyrinth. Maybe it's because his name is Heckel that I wanted to call him Hoggle. I was like, I just kept going back to that. It was great. But all right, we'll get past this OP here and go to the mansion. So we find the Verdun, Germany, the Springer estate. So the couple that was murdered, we'll put them over here. We'll put here the couple because there's some important details about the couple that was murdered. They were the Springer family. And we want to establish that they were very wealthy. There's a little bit of a pattern with what Johan picks as his families to murder. There's a little bit of a pattern there. The Springer estate. Chapter 10, A Past Erased. I like the title of this episode being A Past Erased because it works on a number of different levels, actually. And we'll talk about that as we go through the episode. It works on a number of levels. So yeah, so Heckle just walks up. He just walks up in broad daylight like, oh, hey, there might be something of value left in here. Maybe I could go check it out. Like, he just decides that he's going to walk in before the police come, see if there's anything of value, nab it, and just walk right out, right? Like, it's just no big deal. Like, he's just so used to doing that on the job that doesn't bother him. He has the glass cutter and everything. And he makes it to where he can open the window, do all that. Sure. And he jumps in. He's like, I love it. He says, okay, okay in English. It's like a candy store. Is there anything valuable enough for me? So he uses his resources, but he also is picky. He's picky on what he takes. He doesn't just take anything of value. He's like, no, I need to take something, the most prized possession here that's going to help me. So he knows what he needs, right? I think that it's and I want to take a screenshot of it. I think it's such a poignant moment when he stops and stares at the chalk body outlines of the couple. Like, he just sits there and stares at it for a second like, Like, well, these two people just literally died here. And then he says, man, and the way he describes it, he goes, oh, life is fleeting. He was touted as a candidate for governor. So, Heckle very much is like, life is short. Life is short, and make the most of it. I guess that would tie up here to the whole thing with the cherry and the Manhattan. He's like, life's short. He's like, because, in a restaurant, most people, if you got the Manhattan and it didn't have a cherry in it, would you really bitch and moan about it and be like, put the cherry in it? Some people would be like, nah, I'll just take it like it is. I won't worry about it. But Heckle's like, no, life's short. He's like, I want my Manhattan. I want my cherry in it. So that's kind of more really what it is, right? But yeah, so we find out that this guy was a candidate for governor, okay? He was a candidate for governor. Which is fascinating because the family that we first saw Johan and Nina with were like a celebrity politician family, right? Now, obviously the Fortners were not anything political or anything to do with that, but that first family was. So maybe does Johan have a pattern? Does he have a pattern of being with high profile families or couples? Doing stuff that's high profile. Now, this episode begs a lot of different questions. And one of the things that gets brought up in this episode that I'm going to put here under this thematic stuff is this concept that actions are not, I don't want to use indiscriminate is the right word because that's used in this episode, but actions are not without reason. This episode does a big point in establishing that there is a reason that people do the things that they do. There's a reason that terrorist acted. The terrorist didn't just, the guy there at the end was named Carl. He didn't just act just for the sake of being evil. He had a reason why he did that attack. And it was a terrorist attack. There's no denying it. But to say that it was just an act of indiscriminate evil that had no purpose is wrong. He says there is a purpose. There's a reason I did the things that I did. And then there are consequences to those actions, right? So I'm wondering, with that suggestion that actions are not without purpose, if the reason that Johan is choosing these couples is because we don't know much about the other couples that he's killed. We know about the Lieberts. We know about them. We know about this couple, the Springer couple here. He was a candidate for governor. The Fortners were tied to Nina, but they weren't political. But the families that Johan were with, other than the Lieberts and the Springers, we don't really know. Did those other families have any political ties? Was he choosing those families for reasons? Is Johan going to spring on Timma and be like, oh, I have a reason why I'm doing this? And then Timma has to be like, stop. Because then he leaves that message, of course. Now he leaves the message, of course. That changes the game ever so slightly, right? But I find this interesting, right? That there's a pattern, seemingly. But when he and his wife were gunned down like this, so they were gunned down. So that's important to note. They were killed with a gun. Okay. That is important to know because Tinma, and we'll put Tinma on here. Tinma just acquired a gun. And in the span of time that he acquired that gun, there's been a man commit suicide with a gun, and there's been a couple killed with a gun. The people before were killed with a knife blade, and Tinma was a doctor who had scalpels. So is that... Are they going to try to say that, like, Tinma, you could have killed these couples back then because you had a bunch of knives at your disposal? Is that what we're getting at? And now that he has a gun, Johan's like, okay, well, then I'll start killing them with guns to make it look like Tinma could have done it. I don't know, because it seems like Lunge is questioning, okay, well, if he has a gun, that means any killings with a gun from now on could be tied to him. We don't know. Now, obviously, if you did ballistics, you would check, like, if it was a different bullet or if it was a different type of gun, like, could you match it up with the one that Tinma's got? That would be very hard to do. It'd be very hard to match up the type of gun that Tinma has with all those murders. But if somehow they did, why not? I mean, if Johan's the devil, who's to say that it couldn't have happened? But that's interesting. That's interesting that one little line, they were gunned down. That one little line... It connects to the fact that Tinma has a gun now, and we've seen 3 people die by guns in this episode. And there was gunfire tied to the terrorists. So, that's interesting, right? Interesting. And he's like, oh, I better get down to business. So, here's the creepy part. He's like, the safe must be in this room. And when he goes to open it, he feels a chill. He's like, I felt a chill just now. Now, he thinks it's coming from that room. But then he's like, the first time I've ever felt something so repulsive. Like someone's in there, right? Now, the question is, was Johan in the room? Was he in the room? We don't know. We don't know if he was or not. I think he opens the door, but we don't know. But Heckel, the room... with Johan's message gave him a chill. Okay. Gave him a chill. And then he's like, oh, well, he's like, you're just being superstitious. Like, what am I scared about? It's not like me. Why am I being superstitious? No. And that's when he says, raise your hands over your head. And he's like, oh, he was behind me, not in front of me. It's because the bartender forgot the cherry. It messed up my JoJo. Messed up my mojo. And so he says he's not armed. He says, give me a break, officer. I haven't taken anything yet. And then he thought Timma was the police. And he's like, oh, you're one of us? He's like basically saying, oh, you're a thief. You're like us. You're from the underworld, right? Which is interesting that Tenma is now getting associated with the underworld. In one episode alone, he like goes from being a doctor on the run to possibly being initiated into the underground, you know? And so Heckle thinks that he's this underworld. He could become an underworld doctor. Sure, why not? Which it has implications in its own. But yeah, he says, oh, are you one of us? He's like, in that case, why don't you put that scary thing away? And he says, put your hands on your head. Like, Timma's making no chances. He's like, I don't want to risk you possibly shooting me. And he's like, what's with this guy? He's already dealing with the police. And that's when they hear the police coming. He's like, you fouled up, didn't you? And so both of them, so Timma was investigating the mansion, which is in, the interesting thing though, is, what Heckle brings up later. And he says that everything happens for a reason. That people are destined to meet. Which is kind of crazy, right? Because if you think about it, if Tenma had investigated that mansion, if he'd investigated the mansion and looked around and didn't find anything he was looking for, would he have just left? Would he have left Verdun? Would he have started to ask around about Johan? But how would he have found the one guy that gave him the message? He wouldn't have. So the fact that he ran into Heckle makes all the difference in this story, because if he hadn't ran into Heckle, then this wouldn't have happened. Now the question is, did Johan know that Heckle... Johan could have done his research as well and said, okay, well, Heckle's a guy that runs around and robs places after murders take place, so I'll just kill this family with a nice estate and get Heckle to come over here. But how would he know that Timma was going to meet him? How could he have predicted that? That's just... It's like fortune cookie levels of weird, right? But it's such a coincidence, because yeah, if they hadn't have run into each other, then he probably, how would Tenma have known to found the messenger guy, the guy that killed the family? He wouldn't have. I mean, there's too much that could have changed. So it almost feels like destiny that he met them, that they met together. Which is weird. Which is weird that they just happened to meet through random happenstance, and this chain of events happen as if it were preordained. I don't know. Okay. All right. I guess Heckle's like, don't follow me. Someone like you'll slow me down. But of course, Timma doesn't listen. He's like, damn you. I like that Timma also is running around like this denim shirt, looking very conspicuous. And Heckle's like, this is not my day. But they managed to get away. He's like, I thought you looked familiar. You're the guy in the newspaper, the doctor who's the person of interest in the murder case. I like that Heckle says that Timma is a person of interest, and the terrorist later says that he's the one that murdered that he's a serial killer, right? So that just tells you like the difference of Heckle does not, that's something to note too. Heckle does not buy into rumors. He doesn't buy into the gossip. He knows about the gossip. He knows all about it, but he doesn't necessarily buy into it. So that's interesting. And Tenma has a pretty clean shaven face here. So clearly Tenma has like gone to a hotel or something or found a way to shave, right? He says, and you're a thief. And he's like, exactly. I wouldn't do anything senseless like killing. So interesting. So Heckle says that he does not kill. He doesn't buy into the rumors, and he does not kill. He's a thief. He'll steal from the dead, but he's not going to do their dirty work and kill them, beforehand. He says, unlike you, I wouldn't do anything senseless like killing. Which is the funniest thing, because Tim has not killed anybody yet that we know of. He's not killed anybody yet that we know of. And he says, do you know anything about the killing that took place in that house? And Heckle's like, well, I have no idea. So he's like, bye. And Timma's getting ready to go. He's like, sure. But then Heckel says, hey, wait a minute. He's like, doctor. He's like, you're a top-notch surgeon, aren't you? He's like, with that, my brilliant brain just came up with an idea. And Timma does not look like he cares at all. Timma doesn't look like he cares in the slightest about any of Heckel's ideas. He's like, do you think that meetings happen by chance? They don't, you know. They're between people and are determined beforehand. You and I were destined to become a team. Which, again, it's kind of weird that none of this would have happened if they hadn't met in this episode. Because, yeah, if Tinma had just looked through the mansion and ran away, who knows what would have happened, right? They eventually would have shut off the mansion. He wouldn't have been able to get in. Which is interesting, right? So he believes it was destiny they meet. Now, Heckel's idea is that he's like, the underworld's full of people who need a doctor, right? I instantly think of I think of Twittering Birds Never Fly, or I think of different Yakuza manga where they have an underground doctor, like a Yakuza doctor that just treats their men and that's it. That's what I think of. So Heckel, he tells Tinma that he could work for the underworld. He's like, dude, you could have a solid job. You could be a billionaire if you worked for the seedy underbelly, you could make a lot of money and be quite infamous, right? But that's not what Timma wants at all. Timma's just after Johan. He's like, a lot of guys die because the danger is too great, but, you leave the management to me, I'll be your manager, Heckle, and I'll make you in the best doctor of the underworld. And you'll make a lot more in the underworld. Yeah, because it's like the black market and shit. Of course he would. Of course Heckle would be like, I'll be your manager. Right? Put there. He's like, I'll be your manager throughout all this. And Timma's like, not interested at all. Right? So then he's like, doctor, where are you going? And Timma's like, I have no interest. He's like, I've got to go kill Johan. I have no interest in helping you. And Heckle's like, you're just a sorry sport. You're such a sore sport about all this. He's like, I'm trying to help you and you're running away from me. So then, of course, he baits him. And Timma, because he is still quite naive, he's like, I'll tell you about the murders that happened in that house, don't you? And it's interesting. Heckle keeps his cards close, right? He keeps his options open. He keeps his cards close to the vest. He doesn't tell things right as soon as he finds them out. He waits until the opportune moment to use them, right? And so he tells me, he's like, I saw the killer, you see. And Tim was like, excuse me? You did? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, do you want to know? He's like, wasn't he blonde and about 20 years old? And Heckle says, what do you mean? So no, Johan did not kill the family. They hired this other guy. So Johan had this other man kill the couple with the gun. What's scary is that Johan could have killed them. That's the scary part. We've seen Johan kill Junkers. Like, Johan has no hesitation to kill people. We've seen that with Junkers. He didn't kill this couple. He made someone else do it, or he convinced someone else to do it. He persuaded them. That's scarier. The fact that he could do it on his own, but he had someone else do it for him and then serve as a messenger for Tinma is super creepy. And so then Tinma's like, well, I need you to tell me about the killer. And Heckle's like, well, if you team up with me, then I'll tell you. And so then we get there. So Johan's like, fine. Or Tim was like, fine, I'll team up with you if you tell me where he is. And he's on the 3rd floor of this cheap apartment house. Now, the creepy thing is, too, that we've seen this same scenario. We saw the blind man up on, like, the 2nd or 3rd story of the house. And that had been friends with Johan. Like, what the hell? And so he's like, how do you know that the killer's up there? And he's like, after I set my sights on the councilman's house, I spent a month researching it. And I was set to go when this guy showed up. So Heckle had been eyeing stealing from the house for a while. So that's interesting. So yeah, Heckle was planning to steal when he witnessed the murder. Which is the interesting thing about this is that Heckel didn't turn this guy in. He didn't turn in the murderer at all. Which, if Heckel is a man that's a would-be thief and he's wanted by the police, it could be that Heckel was afraid that if he went to the police to turn this guy in, that he would get caught in the process and they'd figure out who he was. So he was like, no, I'm not going to the police at all. But that's interesting that he's known about this killer and hasn't done anything. He's just been, it's been like he's been waiting to meet someone that would need to know this information. Right? And this guy showed up. He says, when I looked in the window, the councilman and his wife were dead. I figured I could squeeze some money out of the killer, so I followed him. So he was planning on blackmailing the killer. And he's like, well, this proves that you're innocent in this case. Yeah, so, so no, it did. It did prove he was innocent. Damn it, that guy murdered himself. And now you would think that now the culprit in the Springer case has killed himself. Now, you would think that when the police found this guy with the gun in his hand that has shot himself, they would match the gun to the bullets that killed the Springers, and you would think the police would come to the realization that, oh, okay, this is the man that murdered them, and he committed suicide afterwards. He killed the family, he felt bad about it, he shot himself. That would be the logical conclusion if you use the evidence they would come with, right? But the thing about it is, what if they dust for fingerprints on the doorknob and see Tinma's fingerprints and they'll know he was there? And then Lunge could be like, well, Tinma actually was trying to frame this guy as the culprit, made it look like he killed the family and then killed himself when really Tinma shot him. And it's like everything that's happening right now, we as the audience know that there is a logical, clear-cut explanation to why Tinma's innocent. But the way that it works out and the way that it's framed, I could see Lunge looking at this crime scene going, yeah, he framed this. And it's like, no. So yeah, Heckel's like, oh, well, this guy proves that you're innocent. So go phone it into the police if that's what you want. And then you and I can go somewhere. So Tinma has the opportunity, right? He has the opportunity. Oh my God. He had the opportunity to clear his name. Heckel just gave it to him. He was like, if you just want to clear your name and make it to where they don't think you were responsible for this, then go call the police. Have them go get this guy. But he is so dead set on finding Johan, he doesn't want to miss this opportunity to talk with someone that might know where he is. What the hell? What the hell? Tinma. He's so obsessed with finding Johan that he gets the one piece of evidence that could clear his name killed. And so he's like, we could sit and drink and talk about our dreamlike future. Yeah, Heckel offers him a way out. And then he just goes in. No. He's like, what do you want to see him for? He's a murderer. You'll get killed. And I like that Heckel's like, well, I can't keep up with him. I'm going to leave him alone. And then he stops and realizes it's not often I find a source of revenue like him. I really need to keep him around. I make it a rule not to stick my neck out, but... So, in the meantime, Heckel gets all this stuff lined up while Tinma's talking to this guy. Heckel gets all this stuff lined up for Tinma to be taken away and used to heal a terrorist. In the span of one episode, there's so much that happens here. So, then he goes in, and I'm like, and Tinma is prepared. I thought Johan might be in there. I was like, is it going to be Johan or not? But he opens the door up. His fingerprints are on the doorknob. And there's the guy waiting for him. Sitting there with the gun by the picture frame, just waiting for Tinma to show up. Like, he had a chair there waiting for him. And I love that the light shines down, the double cross on the windows, the light shining down, the shadow from the chair. Y'all. And he's sitting there and he just looks disturbingly peaceful, right? And Timma walks in and he's like, it's another hot day, isn't it? And there's a chair right there. He's like, I'm looking for a certain person. And he says, Doctor, are you alive? He knew. Oh, yeah, no, that's Heckle. Heckle's like, Doctor, you in there? You living yet? And he's like, oh, shit, he's got a gun. I love that Heckle comes in. He's like, hey, fool, he's got a gun right in front of you. We should go. But Timma, he's like, he would have shot me already. That's the thing. Timma has learned from the mercenary. He's like, if you were really worried about being killed, he would have shot him as soon as he opened up the door. But this guy does not care if anybody tries to attack him. Oof. So he talks about this idea of he used to go walking with his mother. And I love that Heckle's like, huh? I love that Heckle's like, why are we here? Timma, this guy's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Let's go. But we have the guy here. I'm going to put him down here. And he talks that he used to go walking with his mother. All right. And Timma's just listening to him. He says, along the sunflower fields on summer days like this. So he says that he used to walk with his mom through sunflower fields. So that imagery he associates as a happy memory in his past, right? And of course, she died a long time ago. And Timma says, didn't you use that gun at someone's request? Timma realizes, we get the idea this guy's a bit unstable. And Timma asks, he's like, did you use that gun at Johan's request? Did Johan tell you to? And he asks him just with dead eyes, and he's like, one day he approached me in a bar. And so he says from there, he's like, a blonde man that was about 20 years old. And Heckle's like, And he says, that's right. He had a beautiful smile, that Eric. So Eric is what he's going by. Okay. So he's now Johan. Johan has become Eric. And what's interesting is that he approached him in a bar. So I put on here, approached in a bar. Which suggests that Johan is not afraid to go right out in public in front of everybody to recruit people. He just goes out in broad daylight, doesn't have to worry about slinking in the shadows. He can just go do this around everyone else. And Johan's like, so he's Eric now. He's changed his name. We met a few times and became good friends. He invited me to his home, Councilman Springer's home. So here's the thing. He not only approached this guy, but he quote unquote became friends with him. It's like friends with the devil. It's like he just lured him in and became friends with him. He's like, hey, how's it going? And kind of like what he did with the old man in the house. He kept going to the old man's house and visiting him and befriending him throughout time to then use them, right? And he's like, I went to the councilman's home. He's like, he lived in that mansion until recently. He's like, yes. He said they took good care of him like a son since about a year ago. So Johan's been supposedly, but here's where it gets tricky. Johan was with the councilman's family. Or at least he told them. He told this guy that he had been there with them for a year. But he's like, I had that eye on my eye on that home for a month. And I never saw anybody like that. So Heckle is kind of confirming that, no, something's not right. He's like, Johan supposedly was with them for a year. But Heckle says no. He says that was not the case. He's like, he wasn't with them for a year. So it's like, was he there or was he not there? He's like, they were a wonderful family. And he has a picture there with them. And he's like, that's me and the councilman and his wife. So the creepy thing is that the councilman was just recently met by this guy here that Johan introduced to them. They don't know each other very well. Why are they taking a picture together? What the hell's going on? What? He's like, that's me and the councilman and his wife. And he said there was something I couldn't forgive them for. So he befriended them enough to where they took a photo with him, which is weird. But he says he couldn't forgive them for something. And they're both, and Timba, I like that Timba and her and Heckle are like, what? Like there was a bed of sunflowers on their property. And then the councilman tore it up to build a parking area. So the sunflowers that he connected with his mom, the councilman, he destroyed a patch to make a parking spot. Like this guy clearly has like some mental instability, because it's like, dude, I'm sorry that triggered a memory of your mom and that you're mad that he destroyed that area to build a parking spot, but it's not your home. That's his. He can do whatever he wants with it. You guys barely know him. What? So it seems like Johan picks victims that are easily manipulative. Yeah, they are manipulative. So Johan, he picks his victims, or rather, not even his victims. He picks his associates. He picks his associates and subordinates who have weaker minds. Because Yonkers was the same way. Yonkers had a lot of mental instability too. He seemed like he was easily frazzled and frightened and easily put off kilter. And Johan picked him for the task of, trying to hurt others. So clearly Johan picks people that have like not the strongest of constitutions mentally. And so he just says, he's like, when I said that was an awful thing to do, Eric agreed. Yeah, that's like red flag number one. It's like, yeah, he's like, well, that was just awful. And Eric's like, my parents should not have done that. Yeah, and this guy being so eerily and creepily calm and like friendly about it after he's just murdered this couple. What? It's baffling. And Heckle's like, well, you didn't mean you just killed him because of that. Heckle's like, isn't that bad? Heckle's like, I wouldn't kill anybody. I'll steal from him, but I wouldn't do it, especially over something simple like that. Like, Heckle's kind of in disbelief. And then the guy says, besides, Eric told me that Councilman Springer had a mistress. He also said this: I no longer want to be a member of the Springer's family. I'm not a member of that family. And then he asked me to eliminate them. Oh my God. So Johan was just like, basically, Johan said that the councilman had a mistress and that he was so distraught they didn't want to be in the family anymore and wanted this guy to eliminate them for him. And this guy said yes. But then we find out there's another connection between the guy and this. And Heckle's like, and you did it because he just told you? And he said, he's terrible to have a mistress. My mother was someone's mistress too. Oh my gosh. And he's like, well, listen, never mind that. So this guy's mom was a mistress too. So Johan's just preying on people who have connections to the victims that he picks out. So like the family that he picked out, the councilman, if he had a mistress, he picked a subordinate to kill them that was the son of a mistress that would have a connection to that. And Johan's like, I'm so sad that my dad is having a mistress. I want to get out of this family. Can you eliminate him for being an awful person? And it sounds like this guy doesn't talk about his dad at all, right? He doesn't talk about his dad one bit. So, which leads you to believe that he loved his mom, but his mom might not have been happy because she was someone's mistress and they didn't have a proper family. So again, Johan's picking people to do his deeds that he can easily manipulate because of their past history and because of their connections to the victims that he's choosing. It's genius and it's terrifying. And I'm like, okay. And so then Heckle's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go back to this. course, go back to this. Trying to find the right spot here. I lost my place. So he says it's in the back floor of the study. I want to get back to this. Damn it. Yeah. So he says it's on the back floor of the study on the second floor. And that's all Heckel wants to know. He's like, all right, found the safe. Good. And so he tells Timma, he's like, you got to get out of here. We got the info. We need to go break the safe. Let's go. But Timma just sits with him and doesn't leave. And so Timma says this, right? Timma says the same line that he said to Junkers. He says, you can erase the past. Timma says the same thing that he told Junkers. He's like, you could start fresh. He's like, you could. It's starting to change a little bit though, right? You start to see and sense a little bit of change there. Because with Junkers, he was all like right as rain, like, well, Junkers, you can start fresh. It's okay. You know, you can start a whole new life. It'll be all right. And here, it's not so optimistic. Here he says, well, you can erase the past. You can erase the past. You don't have to be tied down to it. If you don't like, or no, he doesn't say it. No, he doesn't say it. No. Oh, no, he doesn't say it at all. That's what the killer says. Oh, yeah, no. The killer says you can erase the past. If you don't like it, you can erase everything, which is what Timma told Junkers. So that line, you can erase the past. Oh my God, yeah. That was the line that the killer said to him. Oh God, well, that changes everything, right? Because yeah, what a transformation. Because yeah, the killer says, well, yeah, you just erase the past. Johan just told me if I don't like what they're doing, just get him out of the picture, right? But Johan, Timma says, no, that's not the case. He's like, you can reset your life. Oh my God, that's amazing. The killer says you can reset your life. You can just start over, start fresh. But Timma says no. You can try to forget, but you can't erase your past. That's such a change, right? That's such a change because like a few episodes ago, it is so different. He's like, you cannot erase the past. You can try to forget it, but you can't erase it. And the last several episodes, we've seen that. His whole thing with Eva, he's like, Eva wanted to try to erase the past. She's like, let's just start over. Let's just start fresh. Have a second chance. We can go back to the way that we can just start anew and try it again. And Tim was like, no, I can't erase the past where you broke my heart. And so here, he cannot erase the past where Johan's killed these people. That's why he's trying to find him. But it's such a stark difference from what he told Junkers back in like episode 3, right? And this has just been 7 episodes have passed. Oh, I honestly for a second was trying to convince myself that it was still Timma saying that. But no, his attitude's changed. It's already changing from what it once was. He's like, you can try to forget, but you can't erase your past. And then this guy, he just looks kind of solemn. He's like, oh yeah, I guess so. He's like, I wonder why I thought that. I'm like, why did he think that to begin with? Why did he think he could erase it? But that's so interesting that right now we have this idea of erasing the past, which seems like an idea that Johan gave to this man. And that concept in itself is something that Timma believed in up until, several months ago. So what the heck? He's like, why did I think that? Why did I think at the time I could erase the past by pulling this trigger? And that's similar to, that brings up the concept of Nina. Nina thinking that she could, kill her brother and leave it all behind her, and then it got drugged back up again, right? Thinking she could go live with the Fortners and forget everything, and it got drugged back up again. Yeah, the past doesn't die. I wondered why I listened to his request. Yeah, he doesn't even know why he did it. Why did he? And Tim is just looking at him like, oh my God. God, this scene, the tension between the two of them in this tiny little room is just amazing. He's like, that's all I have to say. Please leave. Like that's all he wanted. He just wanted to tell Tenma that he doesn't know why exactly he killed these people, but I guess he can't change anything. It's a done deal. And Tenma goes to leave. And he's like, oh yes. You're Dr. Tenma, aren't you? And this is so creepy. He says, please look at the message. It's a message for you from him. And he's smiling as he says it. It's the weirdest thing. You'll find it in the study of that house. And Tenma's just like, what? Like, I feel like I had the same look on my face that Tenma had. Like, what the hell? Are you joking? He's like, he knew that you would come here. Eric said, your destiny is already determined. Oh my God. Like Tenma just being like, excuse me? Like, yeah. So, this concept, I like this idea that we have Tenma who has changed from you can start over to you cannot erase the past. A much more cynical, realistic view, right? And then this idea that your destiny is already determined. I mean, on the forefront of that, you have like the idea of yes, everyone's going to live and die. It's a predetermined thing. It's going to happen. But it is very creepy that that man was meant to sit there until Tenma came and found him, and Johan believed that he would get there. Like that part is a bit creepy. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then the guy just says goodbye. And Tenma doesn't even yell or anything. He's just like, oh. And I like the Heckle thought that Tenma was hurt. And he's like, I told you, didn't I? Oh. And he's like, don't tell me you... Oh, this is a suicide. I like the Heckle. Heckle for a brief moment goes, did you kill him? But then he's like, no, it's actually a suicide. Never mind. I like it just says, oh, well. He's just like, well, the guy killed himself. How could he? But yeah, he's like, what the hell? What the hell indeed? Right? What the hell indeed? And it just the blood landing all over that picture. So they go back to the mansion. Apparently, the police have not mapped off this mansion. Apparently, in the 90s, we didn't care about that. We didn't put barricades up. Screw it, it's fine. I'm amazed this mansion does not have security because there are valuables in it. I'm kind of baffled that they don't have security there, but it's Germany in the 90s. What do I know? I'm just like, now, if it had been like a politician's house, it would have been like full-fledged security and everything would have been walled off, right? But he goes in the safe, and then, yeah, Heckle says, what's the use in dying? It's all over when you die. There's nothing like living, right, doctor? Again, living for the moment. Huh. And then I like that Tenma says, yeah, you sometimes say something worthwhile, don't you? Again, Tenma makes friendships with the most unlikely of people. The most unlikely of people, right? What is this? What is this business? So yeah, he's like, sometimes you say something good. He's like, what do you mean sometimes? And he says, and so you're after that unbelievable serial killer, Johan. So apparently people know that Johan's a serial killer. So let's see, Johan is the unbelievable serial killer. I think that's worth noting, the word unbelievable, because Johan, this 20-year-old, beautiful, handsome man who seems like the sweetest little piece of sunshine, it's hard to believe he's a serial killer. But then everyone gossips that Tenma's a serial killer because he's a doctor, and they have like just these rumors. It's fascinating that Tenma is being accused of being a serial killer, possibly when he's done literally nothing to really suggest that. They're just kind of cutting corners to make those assumptions. But Johan, who we as the audience know has every means of being the serial killer, they're not convinced. And he's like, why don't you forget about doing something so stupid and just team up with me instead? He's like, when I tried to open this door earlier, I got the chills. And then Timma finds the painting that's askew. And I like that they just, I love that shot of both of them looking up at the painting. Like, what the hell is this? Like, it's something's off about it. Right? It's just begging to be picked up and replaced. And then when he shines the light, he sees the note. And he's like, what is this? And there's the note there. And, like, Timma starts to shake. He's like, why are you shivering, doctor? And then we get this note in German. Mein lieber Dr. Timma, sehen Sie mich. Is it meek? Sehen Sie mich. Das Monstrum in meinem Selbst ist so grob geworden. Look at me, look at me. See how the big monster inside of me has grown, Dr. Timma. Oh my God. He's like, Johan is enjoying himself. Yeah! So, yeah. This monster in me is growing. Creepy, creepy. And Timma's not happy about it. Timma's like, he's just having fun. This isn't right. It's not fair. Yeah, and Timma's just disgusted by it. There's like a weird, almost like double-etched line on Timma throughout this entire episode. It's interesting. And so Heckle is like, hey, wait a minute, hold on. We didn't get to team up and do our thing. And Timma's like, no, I don't want to deal with you anymore, Heckle. And he's like, I offered you a great deal to work for this client. You should be grateful. And Timma's like, I don't want to work with you. He's like, I just want to find out about Johan. And so then Heckle says, well, now wait a minute. You need money to get away from the cops, right? Right? And that does stop Timma, because at the heart of it, Timma's like, well, shit, I do need money. I do need some funds, or I'm eventually going to run out of money and not be able to do anything. So, sure. And that's when these guys pick him up off the side of the road. And this guy, for a split second, I thought it was Lunge. When it showed like the unbuttoned shirt and we saw the jawline, because Lunge has a long face, I really thought for a hot second that it was Lunge. And I was like, is Lunge to catch him? But, no, it was this guy instead. This guy that's got the hots for his terrorist boss. That's him. He's like, this is your client. He'll take you to your patient. So Heckle's like, look, I found you a client. Aren't I great, Timma? And Timma's like, Timma just looks like he would rather be anywhere else right now. He's like, I've got a serial killer to find, Heckle. I don't have time for you. And so, yeah, he just gets in the car and he's like, okay, I'll hold on to your stuff for you. If you want to back, do your job and get paid, and then come back and find me. Timma's just like, Timma at this point is just done. He's like, why do I bother? Like, he's like, of all bad things to happen to me. Like, in the span of one episode, Timma has gotten hooked up with a thief. He's possibly witnessed a suicide that he could be convicted of being a murderer for. And he's been picked up by terrorists. Like, all this happens in the span of one episode. And Timma's just like, why me? What the hell? He's like, earn all you can. Heckle. Oh, my God. He's like, well, since I got an advance, I guess I'll have a drink. So he's taken back to this house on the outskirts of town. And he's taken in by this guy. He's like, counselor, I brought you a doctor. And this guy is like bleeding out. And he's like, oh, please stop the bleeding. And Tim is just like, I have no intention of helping this man. It does not help my cause. No, thank you. And so he looks down and he's like, your axillary artery has been damaged. He's like, did you get hit by a shotgun? And he's like, doctor, you're empty-handed. Where's your surgical equipment? And the one guy didn't bring it because he was in so much of a panic. He's like, no, it was too dangerous in the city. And he looks over and he's like, and Tim was like, I can't operate on you here. Like, and the thing of it is, he could. And he does do something. He does do something. He manages to do something. But at first, he's just like, I have no intention to help you all. This is not my jam. I'm out to find Johan. I told y'all I didn't want to be a surgeon anymore. No. And the one guy's like, what do you mean? He's like, get him to a proper doctor. And I like that Timma's eyes, he just does not care. Timma's like, go ahead and shoot me. At this point, But it's so crazy, right? Because there's a part of me that wonders if Timma is so brazen in this moment because either he's just done with it all, or if he's like, well, if Johan and I are fated to meet one another, they're not going to kill me. It's going to work out that I won't have to worry about it. I mean, if that's part of this, if there's this whole theme of your destiny's already determined, he's like, I just got to go through the motions and get there. But then there's another aspect back here about lives worth saving. There's this whole, we go back to that conversation about lives worth saving, and that ties to all the actions are not without reason. Because Timma's whole thing was, he's like, I'm a doctor and my job is to save lives. And we go back to that conversation back in episode 3 where he was saying, because he's already kind of, turned back on that once, the saying he gave to Junkers of like, oh, well, you can just start fresh. He's like, no, you can't. And now we're going back to the idea of, well, everyone's lives are equal, aren't they? Everyone's lives are equal, so we kind of hit a wall with this double standard because the one guy's like, well, if I would have done it, if I could hurt and fix him. And so he asked how long ago he was shot. And he's like, well, that doesn't matter. And then Timma looks over and he sees like the machine gun. And he's just like, okay. He's like, 4 hours ago when that terrorist attack was. He's like, were you responsible for it this morning? And the guy's like, well, what if we are? And he's like, then I refuse. And then the guy's like, what did you say? He says, I have no desire to treat anyone responsible to indiscriminate terrorist attacks. And again, that's such a curious thing because at the beginning of the series, Timma was like, I'll save anyone. We shouldn't treat people differently just because of their status. All lives are equal. And it's like now he's turning away from that logic, being like, well, you're a terrorist. I'm not going to save you. It's like, well, what do we do about this? And so the guy's like, do you realize the situation you're in? And Timma's like, I don't care. And this one guy, it's almost like he respects him. He's like, hey, he's like, our friends are going to come soon. Will you just stop the bleeding? And then I'll get them to take me to a hospital. And Timma's like, I really don't want to. And then the one guy's like, do you want to die? And I like that. Like, yeah, the one guy, Carl, he's like, it almost seems like he respects Timma. Because he's just like, he doesn't tell him immediately shoot him. He's like, if he doesn't help me, then shoot him. And you can just see Timma sitting here, like, weighing out, what do I do? If I die, then shoot him. But Timma's sitting there waiting it out, like, what do I do exactly? We go back to the Jaeger house, and there's some mafia men waiting on Heckle, surprising no one. And they're telling him he's, like, in all this debt. He's like, you're $250,000 in debt from us, Heckle. And he's like, oh, Mr. Gross, I'm going to pay you back, right? Of course, these guys look like just stereotypical mobsters. And that's when they hear on the news that these guys are wanted for $300,000, Mark. And he's like, Timma's clients. He's like, I'll go find Timma and then get you your money back immediately. This will all work out in my favor. Sure thing. And we find out that Max Steindorf and Carl Blunt. Well, here's our random crack pairing of the week. Carl and Max, I ship them. I ship old Carl and Max. We're going to put them up here. There's not a lot of ships in this series, so I do all I can. I got to get where I can get. And I'm going to ship Carl and Max because Max stood by Carl's side and was willing to kill for him. He said if he could have done the surgery, he would have. He stuck by his side when none of the other boys would. The other boys left him, but not Max. Max stood by Carl's side. Just you wait. And they were taken in custody together so they can make out in a jail cell. I'm just saying. But yeah, so we go back to Timma weighing his options as Heckle promises to get the money before the mob breaks his neck. And he's like, oh, Timma. He's like, Timma's there, but oh well, I'll still get the money and everything will be fine. He'll probably be okay. He probably won't be killed by these terrorists. It's fine. He knows his way. He wasn't killed by a murderer 2 minutes ago. He'll be all right. And so then we go back to Carl, who says, you said what I did was an indiscriminate terrorist attack, didn't you? He's like, well, there was a good reason that I did what I did. And he goes into the story to tell Timma that he's like, I killed the president of the GWE. And he tells him that he's like, I could die tomorrow and I wouldn't mind. He's like, I'm proud of what I did. And I love that Max is just like, counselor. I'm like, ship writes itself, y'all. Ship writes itself. He's like, I was a lawyer in East Germany, and this guy was a secretary to a politician. So yeah, he talks about how the two of them, they weren't just thugs off the street. They weren't just guys that were thieves or, just random criminals. He's like, I was a lawyer. This guy was a secretary to a politician. He's like, we had good upstanding jobs. We didn't just do this because of no reason. We had reason why we did this. He's like, when the wall came down, we lost our jobs. Do you understand how we feel? And it's interesting. It's like when he tries to make a connection to Timma in this instance, being like, look, we had our jobs taken from us and we wanted to get revenge, which is not unlike Timma's situation when he lost his position of becoming the chief of surgery. And it's kind of like he's saying, we hated the president because of what happened to us, so we took action against him. It's kind of like Timma back with the president of the hospital. He wasn't happy. He wanted revenge on him. The only difference is that these guys actually went out and did it, and Timma did not. But the feelings were still there, right? It's an interesting parallel. And he says, after the wall fell, the GWE used the power of money and started building all these factories within East Germany. And they built them one after another. So he talks about how this corruption and greed spread after this one incident, which again connects to the corruption and greed that spread throughout the hospital. So it's something Timma's familiar with. You can kind of see how he would relate to this man. He's like, that's our country. I took pride in shooting him. I took pride. And it's not unlike Timma. It's not. I mean, there's a big difference. The big difference is this man killed a lot of people and Timma killed no one. But the motivations and the reasoning why he did that are not too unlike Timma's in the hospital, right? That he could see the corruption spreading and had taken pride in his job as a surgeon. And it's fascinating, right? And then I thought for a second he died, and so did Max. Max was like, oh, counselor, and I'm telling you, them looks, y'all. Them looks, and he says it's cold. Like, he has his hand on his chest and everything. Y'all, I know they're terrorists, and I shouldn't be shipping them right now, but I am. Moore's dead, so I need a new ship. And so Max and Carl are my new ship. They're our ship of the week. And he's like, hang on, our friends will be here soon. And he's like, they're not coming. He's like, they're not going to be here. He's like, I just have a feeling they're not going to show up. And his feeling's correct. And poor Max. Max just looks like stunned. This Romeo and Juliet story is amazing. And then he gets mad and tells Timma to stop the bleeding or he'll shoot him. And Timma's still just like contemplating everything. And he says they'll kill him. And that's when the guy says, I don't want to die. Carl says, I don't want to die. And Tim was like, because his job as a doctor is to save people. And this man is in front of him that doesn't want to die, that Timma could help right in front of him. And Timma, and I just let Timma just smacks the gun out of the guy's hand. I love he just smacks the gun. It's amazing. I love he just smacks it out of his hand like, nope, never mind. And he goes right up to him and he says, are you afraid to die? Are you afraid to? And the guy's in shock. He's like, that's how they all died, the 12 people you killed. So in this point, Tim was like, the feeling that you have now, that fear you have of not wanting to die, he's like, that's how your victims felt. I almost feel like the one reason that Timma saved him is because he was afraid to die. I feel like characters like Johan's not afraid to die. He doesn't have that fear. And that's what makes him so scary. But this guy does. And I feel like Timma, it's a very human feeling to be afraid to die. It's very human, right? Whereas Johan is a monster. So I feel like when he said he was afraid to die, Tim was like, okay, you're human. Damn it. It like jolted him back to reality. And he's like, the people that you killed, that's how they felt, how you're feeling now. He's like, do you understand that? And this guy is like just about dying. He's like, that's what it means to kill someone. And Tim has not even killed anybody that we know of, but he's like, he's telling him, he's like, that's what it means to take a life. That fear. And this guy's like turning blue. He's like about to die. And so he tells the man to get some disinfectant and scissors. He's like, don't you have that? And thank God they do. Thank God they got some disinfectant and some scissors right there and then. And he's like, he's going into shock. And Tim was like, I'm going to use finger pressure to stop the bleeding. And he's like, I'll suture the open flesh. I need a needle and thread. And Mac's like, we don't have it. And he's like, then do get me a stapler. And he's like, do it. And it's so gross that he just takes it with his bloody hands and just staples it. Ugh. Yep. I love that Mac's like, oh my God, but he doesn't look away. And then he bandages it up. And ties it up. He's like, okay. And then our man, who has been bodybuilding the last 5 months, getting in shape, getting ripped Timma, he like picks him up and hauls him over his back. And he's like, I'm going to take him to a hospital. He's like, I'm just leaving with him. I think that Max is like, now wait a minute. That's what we didn't want. He's like, we can't take him to a hospital. And he's like, if you don't put him down, I'll kill you. And Tim was like, look, shoot me at this point. He's like, but if you do, take this guy to a hospital. And Max can't do it. And then by the time he goes out, the police show up. As luck would have it, the police show up right as Tim is carrying him off. What are the odds? What are the odds? And then that's when Carl tells him to put me down and get out of here. He's like, I knew I'd seen your face before. He's like, you're the doctor who's wanted in those serial killings, aren't you? He's like, hurry up and put me down and leave. It's like, what I did was not an indiscriminate act of terror. Guys I killed were the president, his lackeys, and his bodyguards. So the guy, Carl, tries to make the case. He's like, look, what I did was kill the president's lackey and bodyguards. They were people that were all tied in this corruption. But then Timma says, so you're saying there were no unintended victims? And the guy knew. The guy said, you mean the girl who was at the newsstand? And he's like, so you did know about it, that you had shot her. And he doesn't say anything. Like he did know, right? That there was a girl that was killed that was innocent. He said, why'd you save someone like me then? He's like, if you knew I killed an innocent girl, why'd you save me? Why'd you do it? Because before, with Johan, he didn't know. He saved him and he didn't know. Here, he actively makes a choice to save the terrorist. To save that man. Despite it. And he says, why'd you choose to save me? Not because you're afraid you were going to be killed. That wasn't the reason. Your eyes tell me that you weren't afraid of being killed. Why did you save this indiscriminate terrorist, the killer? And Timma says, because I believed that you were a human being. Okay. So, lives are worth saving if you are human. That's where we're at. We've gone from all lives being equal and all lives worth being saved to, well, you're worth saving if you're human. But he doesn't think Johan's human at this point. He thinks he's a monster, that he's not human, and that's what's going to justify him killing him. Oh my God. It's a lot of food for thought, right? There's a lot of food for thought in this episode. So much. And the guy just smiles at him like, okay. And he's like, go, the police are going to be here. And he's like, you have to live. So again, Timma believes that like by saving Carl, by saving him and telling him that he's still human, that Carl is going to turn over a new leaf, perhaps. Maybe that's what he's hoping. He's hoping that he won't lose that humanity now that he's been reminded of it. We think. So we think, right? Oh my God. And then Timma runs off. And the guy says, you're a brilliant doctor. Ah! Oh my God. Just, this episode. There's so much in it. There's so much. Okay. So much in it. And then Heckle's like, what happened to the money? And he's like, doctor, didn't you get the money? Don't tell me you just fixed him and left. And then they find out that the terrorists were captured. That they were both taken into custody. They were surrendered without a fight. And it almost seems like what Timma did like had a meaning to it. They both managed to be captured. Now, the question is, now that they've been taken in by the police, are they going to tell Lunge about the brilliant doctor that saved them? Oh my God, y'all. And then Timma keeps moving and Heckle is still heckling him. Heckle is heckling him. That's exactly what he's doing. Saying we're not, and Heckle repeats what the mobster told him, we're not running a charity here. Oh my God, this episode. Y'all. Y'all. There's so much going on in this episode. So much going on. Oh my God. So, okay. So we got Heckle. It seems like he's not going anywhere yet. He's more than a 1 episode sidekick, which is fun. But then again, Moore was like a 2 episode sidekick. So I'm like, at this point, any side character, I'm like, will they live? Who knows? But Heckle seems to be somewhat street smart. He's street smart in that Heckle knows how to talk himself out of a situation. Right? And Heckle is not a bad person. He's just slimy. It's funny. We met Moore, who seemed like he was slimy and he was surprisingly heartwarming. And Heckle is just wormy. He's just like a worm. He looks like a rat. That's like his face. Face looks like a rat. But he's not really a rat. Honestly, he's just kind of slimy. Kind of stingy. Right? And then we find out that Johan has had this pattern of killing, couples without kids that may have some money and maybe have some political influence. Who knows? The interesting thing, though, is that I could easily see, based on what Nina has told Timma from the past episodes, I could easily see the next time Johan and Timma meet, Johan kind of giving a spiel like Carl, saying, well, I'm from beyond the border back when the walls were separated, and this is what happened to my sister and I, and it's shaped who I am, and that's why I'm doing it. So am I any different than the man that you saved before? And I'm sure Timma will try to argue that no, you're not human because of X, Y, and Z. But it's interesting, right? It's very interesting. So yeah. It's and now we have Timma, who only saved a terrorist in Germany, but he also witnessed a suicide of a man that was a murderer. I'm curious if Lunge is going to try to pin these things together against Timma, or what we're going to do with that. But he's still on the run from the cops, but with Heckle. Interesting, right? And then the presence of Johan being felt in this episode with the chills, even when he's not there. Oh, we had a nice calm episode last week, and this week it's like we're back in the thick of it. Cheers, monster. Cheers. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen, y'all, these next few weeks. See what's going to go down, right? So, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. Please no spoilers in the comments without spoiler tagging. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode. And I'll let you know when I get that edition of manga. When that volume comes in, I'll let you know. I'm pretty excited about it. But I'll be back next week with episode 11 of Monster. Bye.